Hello, everyone, and welcome to Social Business Hour number 8. Today is a very special Social Business Hour. Brian is at IBM Interconnect in Vegas, so my co-host today is the Millennial, Mr. Daniel Newman. How are you today, Daniel?
Rachel, way to kick it off. It is great to hear a new voice taking charge. Not that we don't love our main man, Brian Fanzo, but doing Smack Talk with him and doing Cloud Talk with him and coming on as a guest, it's kind of neat to hear a new person introduce me. It almost feels like I didn't, impose myself on this show and that you guys actually wanted me here.
We didn't need you.
No one does.
And as always, and on air today, we have the amazing Kristen Kurdos, managing the Twitters and just being her awesome self. I'm going to give everybody a shout out, Kristen.
She's not a millennial. She doesn't get the mute and unmute thing.
No, I got it. I was on another screen. Rachel and I were talking about this right before we went live. Hi, everybody.
So I'm really excited about today's topic. We are discussing how the millennial mindset is changing the future of business, or basically shaping it would be kind of our standpoint, and that's really important for us at Millennial CEO. And I think it's great to make that distinction that being a millennial is not necessarily an age distinction. It's clearly a mindset. So I'm really excited to see what the community has to say today about the topic.
Yeah, this is going to be a lot of fun, Rachel. Coming off of last week where I was out at an IBM event on the East Coast, it was called The Way We Work. And the whole premise was they did a research study with over 1,700 millennials from around the world to try to determine if the millennial myths were true. And in a recent episode of Smack Talk, B and I went over this. I won't go over all the details. I'll make our listeners here go over to our podcast to check that out. But what they did find was overwhelmingly people do not properly assess the millennial. They like to say there's a lot of things, and they're using generalizations versus what millennials actually think. So I think we'll dig into that more throughout the hour, but at the very least, I think it's important to call that out right away. The research is in, and millennials are way cooler than the boomers and Gen Xers think they are.
Well, on that note, let's start with question one. We're kind of set the foundation for today's conversation. So Daniel, how do you define a millennial mindset?
Well, you scored 98 on the millennial mindset test, so I'm going to actually give my feedback, but then I'm going to want to hear yours because you, in fact, may be even more millennial than I am. So I happen to be born as a millennial, 1981, so I'm 33 years old, and I'm a very old millennial. In fact, Brian and I often laugh because we're 30 days apart in birth, so we tend to share a lot of the same technology, passions. But as a whole, I think millennial mindset for me has always been about killing the myths of the way things are always done. So there's, you see those memes, the most dangerous words in business, and I would even go as far as say the most dangerous words in life are, the way things have always been done. And so we're going to continue to do them that way. So as a business leader, someone who ran companies from a very young age, and as a millennial, I always kind of felt that just because the older generation says that hard work is defined by showing up and putting in lots of hours, I wanted to redefine that as it is really all about what do we get done, what do we accomplish. So the mindset for me is kind of killing stereotypes, killing generalizations, and actually trying to come out with new ways to do things differently that equal or create equal or better results.
Yeah, I think I agree, and I'm going to echo that. I think being a millennial, to me, or at least having a millennial mindset, has a whole lot to do with being open to change in almost any sense. So you're an early adopter of technology. You're changing the way you conduct yourself personally and professionally, and even down to if you want to, the way we've always done it is the right way. And not to say that other generations haven't had early adopters. But I think millennials tend to be more quality over quantity in every aspect. So whether it's the work hours that you put in, I think the flexible work hours, working from home, bring your own device, a lot of that we'll talk about later. But I think that's truly being a millennial is being open to doing things.
We are so connected, Rachel, all the time. So like all of us talk all the time. Throughout the weekend we've got our DM messages going. We've got our Facebook messengers going. We're blowing it up publicly, privately, through email. Omnichannel communication is all the rage. So we may easily put in 60 hours a week. We're just not always doing it, in succession, meaning it's not always 9 to 5. It might be like we work 7 a.m. to like noon, then we go do something with our kids for 2 hours, but then we're back at work from like 4 to 10. And I've always said, like, for whatever the role is, it's all about being productive. And if we're going to make the world a better place, and this actually came up on the panel that I was at last week, and they were asking, how do we not fall into the same traps as the former generations? And I said, we have to not become submissive to the pressures of older generations, the ones that want us to work 9 to 5. And that doesn't mean every boomer wants that. It just means that in this new world, this new connected world, the way things have always been done does not guarantee success. It's being proven because there's still a lot of challenges out there.
So being an actual millennial and having a millennial mindset, do you think certain job roles and specifically industries are more likely to, as a business, adapt this behavior? I mean, there are some jobs that do require you to be in your chair 9 to 5. I think we're very fortunate being in a kind of a technology space where we can have more fluid working hours.
Oh yeah, you hit that on the head. I mean, there's brick and mortar businesses, restaurant businesses. There's places where people have legitimate walk-in hours or service hours in requirements, and you can't necessarily change that. However, you can, as a company, change the way you structure people's hours. Like even in retail, right? You want to align people to work when they're able to be most efficient and effective. So while I totally agree with you, factory jobs and stuff like that, but even that, they've always kind of figured out ways. Remember when they introduced second shifts and third shifts, there was people that were really able to work those overnight shifts and be successful, and there was other people that just could not possibly adapt to that type of lifestyle. It's much like that. Programmers and developers, a lot of them do their best work from like 8 p.m. to like 3 in the morning, jacked up on Red Bull and while they're gaming on the side screen, because that's the way their brains work and their brains think. And if a company says, we want to strap you to your chair from 9 to 5, we want you to code out our newest application, that's difficult. Now, like I said, a restaurant's not going to say, oh, God, all of our workers are great from 12 to 4 a.m., so we're going to move dinner hours to that time. I mean, people kind of eat dinner like at 6, 7 o'clock at night. So every industry is a little bit different, but I think it's about, as millennial leaders, is how do we innovate? How do we innovate whatever our business is to deliver the best potential outcomes given our situation?
I agree. It's a good segue to question 2, which is how has having a millennial mindset changed business expectations for internal and external communities? And this is kind of a chicken before the egg or type scenario, because which came first? Did the external community demand change, or was it internal? There's a lot of talk with, buying expectations has changed for customers, but I think with the millennial mindset, a lot of that change has been driven from the inside of companies, with employees having different expectations from their bosses and companies as a whole. So I'm curious to see your thoughts on that.
Well, I think the one thing that millennials really have is they do have this sort of passion for socializing across multiple channels. So one of the millennial myths was that we want to do everything digitally, meaning we only want to communicate digitally. But I actually think that us, just like our predecessors, actually really, really enjoy physical connections with people. Like we enjoy meeting people outside in real life. Like when we travel, we love to go and hang out with people that we've never met before. So that desire to connect, within the millennial mindset means that I think we sort of have this inside-out approach. And when you're building your organization, it really does start by creating a culture that really cultivates the idea of building relationships through technology, but also through physically putting people together. So while I'm a big proponent, for instance, of flexible work, that doesn't mean I don't think people need to actually physically get together from time to time and meet. And I think when you create that culture inside out, it actually helps everything become more successful. This is kind of, we talk about employee advocacy, but your first customer is always your employee. So you can say it maybe as a chicken egg discussion, but I don't really think it is. I think a business that really values building relationships inside is going to value and create people who value building relationships outside, and I think that'll become our community. Even if you look at like what we do at Millennial CEO, right? We've got Kristen and we've got Dom and you and me and Brian. We are our own biggest proponents of community. We are busy acting and talking and being part of these conversations all the time, and that really invites people that are outside, maybe the authors in our community, to become more a part of it, and then our authors invite their tiers. This is like a microcosm of what's possible in a larger enterprise.
No, I agree, and I think with the working from home becoming more popular, I think people are missing that final step, which you do need FaceTime. So whether it's video or planning quarterly to get together with your colleagues, I think that is still incredibly important. So I think, and especially startups, I know they don't really have the resources to perhaps do those events, but getting on camera at least once a week with all of your employees is really important for maintaining that connection.
Absolutely. And you know, I saw somebody out in the Twitters talk about how millennials think it's so important to be millennial or whatever that is. I think it's really funny. We talk a lot about this, like the discussion of generations being at a grander height than ever before. And I think really the reason this is that, you know, they're saying by 2020, millennials are going to make up half the workforce. By 2030, they're going to make up 75% of the workforce. So literally 3/4 of all the employees within the next 15 years are going to be millennials. So you'd have to think that companies are extraordinarily interested in understanding how to appeal to this group, because many of them are only like 20, 21 years old right now. So in 15 years, when this is 75% of the workforce, the older millennials are going to be just coming into sort of the top part of their earning potential and leadership roles in their careers. And the ones that are really young right now are going to be just coming up through the ranks of management. For companies who are looking at how do we sustain 20, 30, 40 years during digital transformation and during all the proliferation that's going on out there, they would be insane not to talk about it. So while I do think maybe there's a little bit of myopia going on with millennials talking about being millennial, I would also actually argue that I think the older generations are the ones that are bringing more of the stereotypes and the negative connotation to this generation, and I think it's because of the public domain that we all feel the need to defend ourselves constantly, because before, no other generation before had so much public visibility to older generations' negative connotations towards them, because every new generation gets ripped by the older ones. This isn't the first time it's happened. It's just the first time that it's happened in the Twitter era.
Yeah, I think as someone a couple years shy of being a true millennial, I giggle when I'm in meetings because constantly the millennial in the room is asked to speak on behalf of all millennials, which goes against what we're talking about now, because it truly is a mindset. You could be 65 and have a millennial mindset, but I mean, I can't count the number of meetings I've been in where everybody turns to that 28-year-old and like, well, what do you think, millennial? And
right, yeah.
Highly amusing.
We're all the same, Rachel. We all think exactly. I was laughing about that because
cookie cutter.
they asked me the question on the panel. The one question they asked me individually to answer was, how are millennial CEOs different than older CEOs or CEOs of other generations? And that was like a perfect example of that. Because I was a millennial CEO at one time, that means I can speak on behalf. So I always say it's experiential, because there are old souls and there are people who still believe very much in the traditional ways of work, and then there are boomers who think very millennial. And I don't discount that at all. I think that it's very likely there's some 45 and 50-year-olds that are more progressive and millennial than I am. I always joke, I said I wear white sneakers. I love my white Superstar Adidas sneakers. I said I'm a millennial CEO and I wear white sneakers. So if the average pundit about millennials took my word seriously, they would now decide that every millennial CEO wears white sneakers. And that makes me laugh. Well, if I'm the only one. So.
Okay, so we're toting the graces of having a millennial mindset, but are there any downsides in your opinion, Daniel? I mean, are we too easy to adapt or too easy to try new things, the next shiny object?
I don't think that. This is the exact example we just talked about. I don't personally believe that's just a millennial thing. I just think society is attention deficit at this age. I'm not picking on the disorder. I'm pretty certain I have it in some capacity. I'm picking on the fact that there are too many shiny objects for anybody to resist all the temptations that come along. Like, I don't think we were this distractible earlier, but I don't think we had this many notifications. I think everyone on this chat could probably agree that they might see anywhere from a few hundred to a few thousand daily notifications. So are we likely to jump and skip to the next thing? I mean, it depends what you're talking about, because in the study they actually found out, like, as it comes to job hopping, millennials are no more likely to hop jobs than boomers. And in fact, Gen Xers were more motivated by money. So while they say we're very impressionable and we'll move easily because we'll be dissatisfied, the truth is, according to the study, that's not the fact at all. We want to be inspired. but so does everybody else. That was it. I mean, they actually found that all three current generations in the workforce, millennials, X, and boomers, all were motivated by the same two things. One was having something that inspires them or that they're passionate about, and two is money. And millennials weren't the most likely to job. But what millennials, again, are privy to is being the first generation where every job change they make is publicly announced. Every change that goes on in our lives is publicly shared on multiple social networks. So people sit there and they go, oh my God, that guy changed jobs again, and that guy changed jobs again. Well, we didn't have LinkedIn when our parents were working when they were 30. So the only way they found out was at a high school reunion or at some event. Nobody knew that people changed jobs. So I think it's just visibility is affecting it so much.
No, I agree. Yeah, I think people in certain roles have always migrated to new positions every 2-3 years. And even though millennials are, it's often said to be the generation of me, I don't think that's necessarily true in my experience. And I think you're right when you're saying that as a whole, employees are motivated by personal growth, education, having the right support in the environment versus purely financial. While it's still a driving factor, I don't think it's number one.
Yeah, I mean, everyone's different. And again, I think that's probably the most valuable thing we as any generation can remember is that every individual is an individual. Every person thinks differently. And while studies will show certain consistencies that can be generalized across a group, stereotypes generally exist because there's some track record of those activities happening within a group, is that you can meet an individual and it's very, very risky to ever associate them to an entire group without giving them a chance to have their own ways and needs.
I agree. Do we have any cool questions from Twitter, Kristen?
Nobody has a cool question? I see a ton of tweets. All right.
All right, we'll move on to question 4. What roles does being open to leading change play in a millennial mindset? This is a question from Brian, clearly.
I think the role of being open and leading to change plays a role in being a good leader. Being a millennial and being a good leader are totally different things. And actually, I think leaders, the millennial, maybe the biggest difference, or the area I would say, is the millennial tends to be a little bit more friendly to using different means of communication. And I don't think this is universally true. So what I said is, myself and others that are millennials maybe are very open to doing ongoing business via text message. And I sat on boards of directors with 55, 60-year-old CEOs of other companies, and they were incredibly inspiring social beings, great talkers, great conversationalists. But I don't know that I'd have an ongoing dialogue with their employees via text messaging. Whereas, the younger may be more willing to do that omni-channel, multi-channel type communication. I'm sure Brian has a reason that he asked this question, so if he does pop in, we'll have to come back to this one. But I think that I don't know if it's so much a millennial mindset as it is a leadership mindset. That being open and truly being open, meaning actually not just saying come in my office and talk to me, but literally going out to your people and asking them what matters to them, creates a better environment no matter what environment you're in.
Yeah, I think a big trend that I've seen with millennial leaders is the reverse mentoring, which I think is incredibly refreshing. Having worked for large companies and then most recently for startups, that flat organizational style, which is often led by a millennial mindset, is really refreshing. And acknowledging a good idea as a good idea, regardless if it came from your intern or from your VP of sales, is just incredibly inspiring. So I hope that is something that continues in the future.
Absolutely. Hey, you know what? A question popped in. Kristen, did you see it?
I did, from Ira. Ira asks, do you think millennial mindset will permeate other institutions such as education, politics, etc.?
You want to take that one, Rich, or you want me to jump in first?
I'm going to say yes. I think it's pretty easy to see, if we want to stick just with politics, that world leaders are getting younger. So I think that people are being acknowledged that they have the smarts and the wherewithal to lead regardless of their age. And I think that's an important, if we're discussing millennial mindset, you don't have to be 70 to be the president of your country. You could be 40 and be just as well respected and regarded and capable as a leader.
So long as it's in the Constitution, right?
which may even change one day. You know, who knows?
The irony of it all is that we actually just introduced our most recent Congress as the oldest Congress in history, statistically speaking. So it's just sort of an interesting data point. But I don't think, like I said, I think the millennial mindset could infiltrate any vertical market. I mean, I think that being the millennial mindset as we defined it. The problem is, and we all know this, is the millennial mindset isn't something that can be truly defined, because in order to do that, you have to generalize an entire generation's behavior. So what I will say is that more innovative, more creative, more digitally inclined is something that already has absolutely infiltrated every industry and will continue to have an impact. Did you, Kristen, by chance happen to see a question from Matt Hannaford out there in the Twitters?
I didn't. I was about to throw one out that was from Music Adam, and you kind of answered it already, because he asked what kinds of business resist the millennial mindset, and you basically just covered that. I missed Matt's question somehow.
Yeah, so I'll throw it out here, Kristen, and you know, the Twitters are flying, so it's very possible to miss
that.
things.
Sorry, Matt.
So I'm trying to find him now because it skipped away from me. So Matt asked, I'm going to grab his tweets because.
Well, while you're looking, I want to kind of make a point just for my current work life. So as chief listener for Pipeliner CRM, despite being a startup, a lot of our workforce is in the 30 to 50 bracket, which I think we can agree with skews kind of older for a true startup. And every single person on staff has a millennial mindset, which is incredibly refreshing, from the CEO on down. So I think we're a good case study on age not being a differentiator for a millennial mindset.
So here's how you missed Matt's question. It wasn't Matt, it was Carmela Lani. And Carmela asked the question, she said, at what point do you think age will no longer be a factor in the workforce, or will it always? And I thought that was a great question. Rachel, why don't you grab that one first?
I'm not going to say it's going to be in 5 years or 15 years, but I think eventually it will have to not be a factor, as long as you're qualified and you have the skills. And I think adopting that mindset of continual learning is also a big player in what we're discussing now, like acknowledging that you may never be the master of your craft because it's continually evolving is huge, and that's something that I think generations before ours didn't really have to deal with. But technology and just the business world at large is moving so incredibly fast. So what we did 2 years ago, I mean, using marketing as an example, doesn't fly anymore. So you need to constantly stay up to date, and you can be progressive in your field at 25 or 55, as long as you stay up to date with trends.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that millennial, or the mindset of a generation, will probably always impact business. I think it's idealistic, and millennials are, to say that age will not matter, but I think it will always matter to some extent. I think companies will tend to continue to struggle to hire older people with high levels of competency to do jobs that are technically seen as needing to be done by younger people. You just don't see a lot of companies hiring social media managers who are in their 50s, even though they may be more than qualified to do it. It's because it's considered something to be done by younger generations. Developers, coders, technical people, cloud builders. I think it's an issue, but I actually think it's a great question, because I think there are a lot of people who are older, more qualified, more capable, and they'll get shunned. And it would be really great to see, just like you know, the male-female equality that was so well pronounced at the Oscars last night. Age equality needs to happen, and as much as they've tried to I think it'll struggle, and I don't know that millennials will fix it.
No, but I think even that, I mean, if we want to stick with social media as the example, I think businesses have already learned that you can't pass your social strategy to your intern just because they're 21 and they have a Twitter account. That means nothing at the end of the day. So I think we're already seeing the pendulum shift where you do need experience, and I think someone who is a little bit older can bring that.
Guys, we have another question. Vincenzo asks, can technology lead change without humans being behind it?
Ask that again. I was
Oh, okay.
checking out the Twitters.
Vincenzo wants to know, his question was, can technology lead change without humans being behind it?
My gut reaction is no, just because humans invented it and you would need their support to execute it. I guess it depends really on the context of the question, but Daniel, I'll let you take a stab at it.
Well, I mean, I think you're talking about the evolution of cognitive computing, artificial intelligence, um, the whole her kind of thing. Can we build relationships with a human? Can a human get to know enough about people? It all is rooted in the data, Vincenzo. So the bottom line is how much data is available to create to cognitively get to understand human behavior. I think that it's fairly unlikely and unrealistic that without some prodding and guidance from the human condition that they will actually be able to lead meaningful change. But I think if you think about the integration of robots, the integration of artificial intelligence into the business, it does change, because how many jobs will be replaced by the robots? So on Cloud Talk last week, we had Louis Columbus, and we were actually talking about the smart business, the innovative business, the millennial mindset business, perhaps, is going to look at where artificial intelligence or robots can replace jobs that are being done that don't require humans anymore, but that should be used to up the ante, to up the cream to the top, and help every employee move up to the next level of value that they can create for their organization.
I agree. That was a really compelling Cloud Talk, and that kind of echoes my feelings on social media automation, which has historically an incredibly bad reputation. Even while the technology itself is actually quite clever, humans are misusing it. But at the end of the day, the goal is to leverage the automation and the robotic aspect to allow humans to do what they do best, and that's to be human.
Hashtag human. Hashtag it's all about the cookies. Okay.
All right. We're moving on to question 5. What should marketers do differently when targeting millennial ages versus those with a millennial mindset?
Oh, so now we're actually getting down to the semantics of actually marketing to millennials versus people who think like millennials?
Yes.
Throw it against the wall and pray. You know what? I think you're talking, it's a big data problem. I'm going to pull that out because that's what I always fall back on. But I think it's not so much about doing things differently, it's about utilizing big data. So I think what you're really talking about here is how do we market to everybody individually? How do we get back to one-to-one selling as much as possible, where we are actually putting our messaging in front of the people who want it? And it comes down to the way we utilize data. We need to be collecting social data. We need to be using listening information, CRM data, ERP data, also unstructured data, which is all the information that's widely available on the internet, and then also all the demographic data that we collect from our customers, clients, research, etc., to actually say who are we marketing to and what message are we putting in front of them. Then we need to use technology to actually make sure we're pushing as individualized messaging as possible to every person who's going to receive our message. So I don't know if it's so much about millennial mindset versus millennial age group. I think what we're really saying here is how do we get back to marketing to people individually? And that's whether they're a millennial or they're older, is no matter how they think, how do we get the right message in the right place? It's also an omni-channel thing, Rachel. How do we get into the right channel? Some people want their messaging via the postal service. Some people want it in their inbox. Some people want a text. Some people want it social. Some people want to go out to the store and get it. Everybody's got different needs. How do we, again, make it available for those who have those needs, that they can get it where they want it, when they want it, just like our good friend Kevin Spacey said about why he decided to put House of Cards on Netflix?
I think I'm going to take a different angle. For me, targeting millennial, the actual generation, versus those with the millennial mindset is quite different. So having a millennial mindset at 65, you're in a completely different place in your life versus a true millennial who perhaps is not married, has no children, is in their first professional job. The value propositions are much different. So I think you need to acknowledge that. And it is, again, it's about leveraging data, but acknowledging that someone is an early adopter and going after the next shiny thing, but has a mortgage, 2 kids, and maybe is a business owner, is different than targeting a true millennial.
Guys, we had a question. CWP Biz asked if we could define Generation Z.
Generation Z is the generation. Do you want to grab this? Do you have the definition in front of you?
I do not have it in front of me, no.
The best definition I can give, and I haven't studied this generation with a lot of details just yet, but this is the generation that's coming up following. So like our children, Rachel, your children, my children, are what's considered Generation Z. And that's going to be the next group coming up. So that's the under 20, I believe, right now. the not yet in the workforce. Maybe it's under 18. And I don't know if it encompasses the kids being born today, but I think it was probably at least the 10 years prior to that.
Yeah, I would agree with that. It's, yeah, I don't know the specific breakdown of the years, but generally I agree.
Yeah, we'll put that out there in the show notes for those. You know, we don't want to ignore the question. It's just we didn't do this wasn't a Gen Z research, but maybe that's an interesting future topic for such a BizHours. We should talk a little bit about the generation that comes next, because we are so absorbed with talking millennials. We're not even talking about we're really not even talking about what's coming next, and maybe it's time for us to start stomping on that next generation. I mean, I tell my kids they're lazy all the time.
Well, yeah, I think, you know, millennials now, they're at least graduating college with a degree. I think Generation Z, they're more in that graduating high school, entering college bracket. So the workplace is going to look completely different for them, particularly as it's going to be led by millennials.
You think the millennials are in trouble? And if we don't get things right, those kids are in real trouble.
Well, everyone's just going to be working from home, so we'll never see them.
Hey, the futurist study, Faith Popcorn, from when we were in that New York event, actually said that by 2020, 50% of the American workforce will be freelance. We'll see how true that is, but isn't that fascinating? It
is, and I think I'm kind of excited about it. I do embrace what Pipeline we call the salespreneur, which kind of enables people to be, whether it's an intrapreneur or entrepreneur within an enterprise setting, but gives them the freedom to have multiple hustles, which I think is healthy. They can spread their expertise to many companies and benefit more people instead of being locked into one position.
Sounds like you know a little something about that.
I am an active salespreneur.
Aren't we all? So you want to jump to question 6? So millennials, they say, are results driven, Rachel, and that has an impact on the mindset. I think many generations have been result driven, but you know, what changes do you think like other generations have to embrace to deal with the millennial and their feeling towards what results driven means?
I'm not sure if it's just results driven or being acknowledged for being a participant in the results. I think that's a huge part of being a millennial. The millennial mindset is having your contribution acknowledged. But yeah, I think all professionals are results driven. It's hard not to be. Otherwise, what would you get up in the morning for? So I'm not sure what the differentiation would be there between millennials being more results driven. I think that's a necessary part of being successful in life.
Yeah, and I think maybe some of the inspiration behind this question is the every kid needs a trophy discussion, right? That millennials are results driven in the fact that we actually not only want to make results happen, but we want to be constantly recognized for the results that we're creating. And this, ironically, maybe not, maybe the timing's just good, was one of the myths in the study that turned out to be actually not true. Again, though, in a world where there's so much ongoing dialogue, content being created, company announcements, emails, videos being created, I think there's more opportunities for recognition, which maybe makes millennials more interested in seeing their name in lights. But it turns out everybody out there is sort of similar in their desire to have their name in lights. And millennials are just kind of equally in that bracket. Millennials do want honest, ethical bosses that give them clear goals and measurement and mentorship. But I would actually argue again, I don't think that was very different in the generations that preceded us. I just think there's more visibility to it today.
Exactly, yeah, that's what I was going to say. I think just because of the, social media, it's so easy to give somebody a shout out, and millennials know that. So when they're not acknowledged, it definitely stings a little bit. Because in past generations, it was a formal press release, or you got that letter in the mail. Now it's super easy to send someone some love on Facebook.
Guys, we got another question. It's from Terry Kajetan, and she asked, does the internet remove that millennial age distinction because it's online, and how do you cultivate the mindset?
I think before we jump in, we've got to acknowledge that there's been a sighting on the show. There's been a social Banzo sighting.
Hi, Brian.
Hi, everyone. I see your tweets flying through, and I was getting texts from my dad, who was actually. So I was like, I gotta run off the stage and ran over here, but I'm sure you guys are rocking it. So keep on, keep it on. I'll jump in.
Okay, so he's here. He just rocked his Ignite talk. Everybody, make sure you go over to IBM Interconnect, and if you hear the noise, give him some amplification because we want to make sure that those people know they need to bring him back next time.
Sounds
so,
good.
Terry, your question about does the internet eliminate the age? I'm going to answer it the same way I answered the last one, and I'm going to be really excited to hear everybody else's opinion. I think that internet creates equality in terms of the ability to deliver and the ability to learn and be educated and do things, but I don't necessarily think, I think it's a subconscious issue because like I think when companies are hiring, you can't ask somebody their age, but you know, generally you get them on video or you meet them face to face and you immediately get a feel for somebody's age. I do think the more learned or comprehension you have of a topic, the more age becomes less relevant. But I still think companies struggle to hire older people to do jobs that they kind of fit into that millennial bucket or they fit into that younger bucket, and I'm not sure the internet can fix that. Fans, Miller, what do you guys think about that?
I'll let the new kid jump in.
Well, I think it's interesting because I think it's all about, I mean, that was my theme of my talk today was digital storytelling. And, every person has the same ability to share their story, their purpose, their passion via the tools that are allotted to us. So I think it's a levels the playing field there, but I also think the ability to embrace this change, I think, is what separates the difference between people that kind of like, hey, I don't care that I didn't do my makeup today, or I guess it looks like Daniel did his makeup today. But it depends on when you get on screen, if you're able to and willing to be yourself on video, and kind of embrace that element of you, I think that's powerful. And I think some of the other generations might have difficulty on that because it's not something that they grew up in. We, as a millennial born in a millennial age, I think it's the idea that video and the front-facing camera has always been there, or for at least a majority of our lives. So I think that's an interesting balance.
Yeah, I mean, I think the internet and social in particular is breaking down barriers. So when you are engaging with someone on Twitter, I know me personally, it's unlikely that I would look to see how old they are. Usually you're engaging because you like what they said. You don't discredit them for being a certain age bracket or looking a certain way. It's more of just the sentiment of the message and the value that they're adding.
Agree.
So let's jump into question 7. How will the future of work change when there's more millennial mindset CEOs? Which we did touch on earlier, Daniel, but if you want to elaborate on your thoughts.
Well, they're all going to wear white sneakers, they're going to wear backpacks, flannel shirts, and they're going to do crazy, exciting Ignite talks. And that's all that's going to happen, actually, when millennials take over. I think the bottom line is that when the whole stereotype of we have to do it the way it's always been done goes away, businesses will evolve, right? I saw a tweet that came out earlier. I can't remember if it was Tim Hughes. Somebody put it out there, though, and it was that 50% of the Fortune 500 is already gone. What's going to be left in 2020? And it's because business proliferation is so fast. Companies that had it really, really well even 5 years ago don't have it so well because small companies, fast companies can come in and literally undo hundreds of years of innovation because innovation is so small, so rapid, so constant. So I think that millennials or younger people or millennial mindset CEOs are going to see the need to constantly learn, educate, change, evolve, adapt, become more proficient in whatever it is they're going to do, and always have their eyes on what's around the corner. Because I think that's the hardest thing is it's not about what it is now, right? Like 5 years ago, we all saw that Twitter was going to be popular, but it was what was going to be next, right? So now we're starting to see the media hub evolution, right? So we're moving to media, we're doing video. You guys were an innovator. You added video to the Twitter chats, right? But what's the next thing? Because right now, if we just stay on this track, somebody's thinking already now about what the next way of communicating, the next way of having this conversation is. And if we're just getting complacent with this, we're going to miss that curve.
No, I think that's a good point. I think also it's the idea that a CEO has to be able to embrace what the community and the people are doing today. So, I mean, the idea that too many CEOs today talk about culture and talk about the need to be a social business, yet they don't have a social account, and the culture to them is what they hopefully, they paid because they want someone to have free lunch. That's not the culture. I think the new age, the CEO that doesn't say I have an open door policy, but they get outside of their door, they go out and are a part of the community. That's when it changes the game. I think that kind of goes to your point, Daniel, on the idea of actually going and living the space and being part of the environment as well as part of the company, not just the one that's like a dictator down of it.
So Alan Berkson had a great tweet that I'll share. He said, the younger generations are growing up feeling empowered to tell their own story, which I think definitely gives them a leg up on even our generation. We were maybe encouraged more to fit in versus stand out, so I think it is cool that folks are using social to really make a difference in their own way.
Yeah, Alan's a smart dude. I wish that he wouldn't have retweeted my throw it against the wall and pray answer to your question, because I had a whole bunch of more I had to say about that, but he told me on the Twitters that it was just link bait. So I'm going to forgive you, Alan. I'm going to forgive you, but let's not let that become a regular occurrence, because I'm going to add you into my next...
Alan. Daniel's just moonlighting.
Yeah. I'm just showing up this time, but next week I can be anywhere.
So I know we did talk about some of the millennial myths that are pet peeves, but question 8 is, what millennial myths do you wish would just go away?
Brian, go first, because we might say the same thing. I'm going to give you a chance so I don't talk all over you.
No, I think it's the one that they want to do everything with technology and they no longer care about people. I mean, I think that idea of, it's technology, so they have more time to be with people and do the things that make them happy. It's not they want to use technology for technology's sakes, and that has to change. And the people that think that are the ones that go, all they do is stare down at their device. Well, little do they know we're collaborating and building relationships with 300 people at one time that then turns into relationships where it allows me to engage with these people on a more regular basis, at events or at things. So I think that's one of the ones that, to me, don't excuse don't think that because people are leveraging technology that they're doing it because they just love technology. They're doing it so that the other parts of their life, can improve.
Yeah, they're only fake friends if you never make them real friends, right? So that's a tweetable, by the way, for everybody out there. Because something like, if you suck at social online, you're going to suck at it offline, or something like that.
I know that quote. The quote got taken. So in my Ignite talk today, I said, to be true to your brand, and that, to try to transition from online to offline. But remember, if you suck offline, you're going to suck online. And apparently that one went crazy, because that tweet's been all over my feed since I got off the stage.
That's good. It means, again, you create memories and experiences, and that's why people are going to want to have you keep coming back. So, for me, the myth I want to have go away is that millennials are lazy. That's the one I always hear. And I work probably 80 hours a week, and I'm a millennial. So if we're going to go ahead with the stereotyping, then I'm not lazy. And I know a lot of millennials that aren't lazy. Now, in any generation, I know, my uncle's a baby boomer, and he's the laziest guy I know. He's been unemployed for like 2 decades. So I think that saying a generation is lazy it's misguided. It's almost irresponsible to call an entire generation anything. I think what we are is we're innovative. I think we're creative. And I think, there are many of us that say, hey, if I can do the work in 10 hours, why should I take 40 to do it? And if I can do the work in 10 hours and take 30 enhancing my life and enhancing the experiences of others, there's nothing wrong with that. There's nothing wrong with seeking a life that isn't completely, defined by our jobs. I say our work should not define us. Our work should enhance us. So if that's a millennial mindset, then I'm okay with it. And, the people that say we're lazy can kiss my ass.
Well, I think that comes back to the quality versus quantity. I know people that can sit at their desk for 10 hours and accomplish nothing, versus someone who maybe works from home or is leveraging technology can be highly productive in 4 to 5 hours. And basically that's their work day. And then they're off to do, whatever takes up the rest of their time. And I think that's a credit to millennials. It's being hyper productive during your best working hours and making the most of it.
Well, yeah, that podcast episode that Daniel and I did that went kind of crazy. It's our most popular podcast episode without question, is about flexibility and the ability that, to be trusted. And that element means that who the hell says that 9 to 5 is when I'm most productive? And to be honest, why would any large group all be productive in the exact same environment in the exact same time. That's just that's just a bunch of crap that we rely on. It's because of the way we've always done it, or because when we were power cost less during those hours, or daylight savings time, all these random excuses.
Yeah.
I think it comes back to the idea that if you want the most productivity of your employees, you have to trust them and then give them the ability to work where they're most productive. And you know what? If someone is so productive that they accomplish their goal in 30 hours and you're paying them for 40, don't penalize them by giving them more work. Reward them for being productive. And I think that's the scary part that this generation kind of worries about, is like, hey, if I prove how productive I am and I'm able to whip all this stuff out, I mean, this is a success metric. Our goal is to measure success. And if those people are hitting success for being productive and being more, I'd say more timely, then we need to embrace that element of it.
Well, and we kind of hit on that because I talked a little bit, and we're starting to sound like each other. We're gonna have to be careful about that because you repeated like 3 things I said earlier in the show because I was talking about that exact thing, and did daylight savings and cavemen and all the things that we talked about on our podcast. So yeah, you totally hit it on the head. I mean, inspire them to raise the cream to the top. Inspire them to say, okay, if you've got 10 free hours, I'm going to give you 2 choices. 1, I'm going to pay you for your 40 or your week because you get what I needed you to get done. Or 2, I'm going to enhance your career. I'm going to move you up the ladder, and I'm going to continue to challenge you to find what keeps you motivated for 40 hours. But in no case am I going to say, screw you, you're too efficient, so for the same amount of money, I'm going to ask you to do more work in the given time. That's the anti-millennial mindset, and that is basically the way you can ensure you're going to alienate your employees and minimize your employee engagement.
Which I think that is a struggle that a lot of millennials are facing, is that they are incredibly productive, but they're not deemed as being productive just because they're getting their work done in a shorter amount of time, which is actually a nice segue, again, into question 9. So I think it's fair to say that millennials are one of the first generations to have a really vast multi-generational workforce to collaborate with. People are working longer, and people are starting work earlier because we're acknowledged that you don't necessarily have to go to college to be a rock star in certain fields, particularly in technology. So kids are starting young, people are working super old. So how do millennials engage those around them that do not have a millennial mindset?
Well, I mean, I don't think you can preach or talk about if you're not willing to help others embrace it. I mean, it starts there. So, if you sit around and bitch and say that my company doesn't do this, my culture sucks, and all these things, but you're not one that's willing to lead the change and go above and beyond, shut your hole. I mean, that's what it comes down to. So I think it's partially, one of those things that, we have to lead the change by documenting. And I mean, I'm going to use another one of my hashtags on that, screenshot awesomeness. But, I believe that we have to not only promote the wins, but we have to talk about the how and the why. Because if we just talk about, hey, this business closed because I leveraged social media, that person's like, well, okay, that's a one-off chance. But if you the 13 conversations I had that allowed me to have that one face-to-face relationship is what closed this deal. They now understand that it's more than just on the way. So I think it's focus on the how and the why, but also get off your ass and teach people how to change, not just
So we got about 90% of what you said, but I'm going to fill in the blanks. It was like 3 cuss words, 1 really hashtag usage on air, and everybody's really, really excited about whatever it is that you just said, even though it didn't cut out. But you're exactly right. I think there's 2 things. Is what Brian said about offline and online, maybe the most relevant way of explaining it. But all the generations that precede us and all of them into the future, I think, are still going to be motivated by real-life human relationships and communication. The way we choose to communicate may be different generation to generation, but when I was 28 years old, my average employee was nearly 50, and I was a CEO and I had 120 employees. And trust me, the respect and reciprocity did not come fast, nor did it come easy. But it was because when I first started, I came charging in like a bull in a china shop, thinking I'm smart, I've got the title, I've got the corner office, you're going to listen to me. It wasn't until I realized that when people feel heard, when people feel like you're listening to them, and you truly are, will they actually see that we're just 2 human beings, right? How is it that suddenly when you're in your 30s, you can have a friend that's in their 50s and it works, but when you're 18, you can't have a friend that's in their 30s? It's because that maturity level isn't there. And in your 20s, I think a lot of millennials are still a little bit immature. They're still a little bit too steadfast that their way is the right way, or that they're smarter, that they're more digitally connected, more capable. And that's the thing, is we're not smarter, we're not better, we're different. And when we realize we're different and we embrace that, then we can start building relationships with the older and the younger, and then actually make more meaningful business, more meaningful business outcomes.
Well, I think that's part of the element of, like, we don't need a bunch of yes men around us. I don't think we've realized that's not successful. You have to find the people that know what you don't. And that starts by knowing what you yourself doesn't know. But that element also is kind of like that open collaboration. And how do you find these people? Like, if you don't understand something in business, reverse mentoring is like one of my favorite things that I think has had a huge impact. I mean, I didn't know much when I was going on, but I was teaching them how to use an iPhone and how to use social media, and they're giving me in the boardroom, including me on phone calls I had no business being on, and that helped me learn and embrace at a faster speed, and I also gave them value as well. And I also think the other thing is, from just my whole rant on the idea of, you have to really teach and lead the change, it also starts with the idea that, when we're talking about this change and we're trying to make a difference, I mean, part of it comes down to the idea that not everybody's going to learn the same or do everything at the same pace. So we have to almost trust that people are willing to embrace it. And in the end of the day, companies are going to hire and fire for culture fit more so than they've ever have before. And those that aren't willing to get on board, I mean, they're going to be on the fire fit side of the culture divide.
It's interesting. Somebody out in the Twitters, Kristen Johnson, says, like, stop calling it the millennial mindset, and it's actually turning off, the older generations, because I don't think they want to be relabeled as millennial. And
I disagree. Every blog post I write, every single one that has millennial in it, every single one of my comments is, it's not just millennials. Millennials aren't the only ones. And that's the whole point, is I don't think it is. But I don't think any of us like name tags or being bunched in a group. But at the same time, if you're gonna, I've always been proud to have that millennial label, and I was shocked to hear how many people were embarrassed and were shying away from it because of all these misnomers. So I understand not wanting to be labeled, but if you're gonna throw labels around, I think it's less throwing a label about one variable, meaning the year someone was born, and why don't we throw the label around and label people that are willing to drive change and do all of these things that make up that mindset.
Yeah, absolutely. I think her point, though, is interesting and relevant, is that even though we are starting to see the evolution, we're taking over the workforce just by numbers, by raw numbers, and in the next 10 years even more so, is that we do need to continue to embrace the value that everybody brings to an organization. We don't want to put others in buckets because we don't want to be put in buckets, but you're absolutely right. People are interested. And we talked about this earlier, Brian, before you're here. The study, said that companies have to figure out how to appeal to this generation, because this generation is going to represent the largest part of the workforce in the coming years. So there is a lot of interest in understanding how to relate to millennials. So while we'll say we can call it anything you want, you can call it love, you can call it kismet, you can call it by chance. But the fact is that we do need to understand this mindset. We do need to understand how it impacts cross-generational relationships. Because if we don't, we're taking a risk in all of our businesses by not appealing to this huge demographic.
So we like to end the show with a prediction question. And this one I'm really curious to hear what everybody has to say. We are crediting millennials with kind of spurring a lot of change for business. So I'm curious to hear your thoughts on what accolades we may give Generation Z as they're beginning to enter the workforce, and what they're going to do for the future of work.
Generation Z, I just think of it this way. The idea for us that a payphone existed has never existed for them. There's no such thing as a payphone. And the rate of change that exists today is like nothing before. The idea of a Blu-ray DVD has only been around for like 4 years, and it's almost already obsolete. Where we had a VHS tape, my dad had a VHS camcorder on his shoulder every Christmas. That was technology that lasted forever. That rate of change is going to make this new generation not only love and embrace that change, but they're not going to be set in their ways when it comes to technology, because don't even talk about the fear of missing out. It's going to be the element that they are embracing the more of the done, less than the technology, because the technology will always change. You can never really stay in front of all the tech as I try. I think that element comes down to they're going to worry about the people, the processes, and accomplishing these goals by collaborating and driving all of these, crowdsourcing. All of the elements that people are growing up in today, where before you felt like, hey, I'm being bullied, I'm left out by myself. Now you're able to publish your story out there. And yes, there's going to be some haters, but thankfully that's why we have mute buttons and unfollow and spam. But together we can drive change as a community and share our stories across bigger realms. And this generation that's coming up now, I mean, they're doing that at 11 years old. I mean, we were doing that when we were 19 and 20 as millennials. I mean, that's going to be a definite change.
Yeah, I think the ability to make social impact is huge. And while I do think that every generation has been innovative and every generation has spurred business evolution, I do think that the fact is that even us, like I didn't have Facebook in college, so and I'm considered a millennial, right? So the next generation is literally going to have grown up from birth with all this technology at their disposal. And I think that they're going to find more and more ways to do good with it. They're going to find more and more ways to evolve business. They're going to find more ways as the law of diffusion of innovation, as this means, like, what Simon Sinek talks about, how fast technology is innovated. They're going to find ways. I'm telling you, by the time we're in our 50s and 60s, what's going to be happening with artificial intelligence, cognitive computing, big data, our world's going to be completely different. I think 5 years from now, our world's going to be completely different than we see it now, and a lot of us aren't even willing to recognize that. Every year is changing, and what's happening is just like the Earth spinning, it's changing before our eyes. So, you watch your child grow, right? Your kid's uncle comes over and says, "Holy cow, your kid's grown. Look how big she is." You don't even notice it. Like, my kid grew like 6 inches in a year. I barely noticed she'd been growing because it happened so fast ahead of our eyes. But this is literally the rate of change we're dealing with. Is it's happening under our feet and before our eyes every day. And while I can't predict the future, what I'll say is I really hope Generation Z embraces this. They grab it by the horns, and they use all this great technology that's been created today to do something really meaningful with it.
And I will gladly one day accept the fact that I have a Generation Z mindset whenever they lead that change on that side. I will never not embrace that element because I think we all want to be Toys R Us kids, so I don't feel like growing up.
I'll tell all those old-ass millennials to leave us alone. I'm a Gen Zer now. But I'm still not giving up Word. I like Microsoft Word, and you guys can kiss my ass one time for the show.
Had to go there.
Awesome.
Well, I figured, there's no better way to wrap it up than to take credit that I'm a little bit Gen X, because I still do love Microsoft documents. But you will not find a Microsoft operating system anywhere in my home. I am an Apple junkie through and through. So, that's the millennial side of me battling with the old man.
Well, the millennial side of you is, though, also we proved the fact that Google was a better solution for the why. You embraced it and now you're utilizing it, right? That's the difference, I think, between those that look at it and say, no, I'm stuck in my ways no matter what, don't ever tell me anything wrong, and then the other way. So I apologize for missing the first half, and I love this topic and this conversation. But you guys rocked on, of course, without me. So
we'll see how the Twitters did. It'll be A/B testing. Did we do as good without Brian? But hey, Brian, where can people see your Ignite talk? Tell them. Give yourself a plug.
Actually, yeah, it's supposed to go up on IBM Interconnected at some point today. But Brian Kramer was actually sitting in the back of the room with his GoPro, so he has a YouTube link out to everybody. It's 5 minutes. It was fast. I had no confidence monitor, which they told us they would give us a confidence monitor for. So it was fun time.
I can't wait to see it myself. And everybody out there, make sure you check it out. Our very own Brian just rocked Interconnect in the Shark Tank. Well, maybe not actually in the Shark Tank, but that was a different thing. But at Impact, given his Ignite talk, sorry, at Interconnect. So check it out. Give support. Rachel, thanks for having me. I think you can say I talk almost as much as Brian. I just don't tweet as fast.
Yes, actually, I was just checking the calendar, and the Social Business Hour community is in for another treat next week as we have you back discussing your new book.
Yeah, and I think we're going to be doing it from Spain. We're going to have to get this figured out because Brian and I we're taking this tour global. We're going to Mobile World Congress next week in Spain, and we are going to be talking all kinds of noise. So can we do it at 3 p.m. Spain time? All right, we'll figure this out. But
well, thank you, everybody, on the Twitters. It was a great chat. I can't wait to go back through and reply to everybody. Happy Monday. Have a wonderful week, and we'll see you same time next week.
Thanks all. Cheers.
Peace, love, and kismet.